Welcome to this explainer on the House of Wittelsbach. Today, we're diving straight into a real-life family saga of power, ambition, and architecture that you can actually walk through today. If you've ever admired the sweeping, massive palaces of Munich or those incredibly famous fairy tale castles tucked up in the Bavarian Alps, you are looking at the direct legacy of a single, ridiculously resilient family.
738. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of years the Wittelsbach dynasty enjoyed uninterrupted rule over Bavaria, all the way from the year 1180 right up to the collapse of the German Empire in 1918. To put that into perspective, this family completely outlasted the rise and fall of countless other European houses. They survived shifting borders, massive revolutions, and world wars.
So it brings us to this massive question. How exactly do you pull that off? I mean, how does one single family manage to survive the muddy feudalism of the Middle Ages, navigate the absolute labyrinth of the Holy Roman Empire, dodge the conquests of Napoleon, and make it through the devastation of World War I? Well, the answer lies in their unmatched ability to act as geopolitical chameleons. They were constantly reinventing themselves, and they brilliantly anchored their power in breathtaking physical spaces.
Part 1. The Medieval Rise.
To really grasp their survival skills, we've got to look at their incredibly strategic rise to power. It's the foundation for everything that comes later. The whole thing kicks off in 1180, when Emperor Frederick Barbarossa dismantles the power of a rival duke and basically just hands the Duchy of Bavaria over to Otto I of Wittelsbach. But they definitely didn't stop there. By 1214, they acquired the electoral Palatinate. Now, this was a brilliant strategic move because it gave them a highly coveted vote in electing the Holy Roman Emperor. And guess what? They didn't just elect emperors. Twice in history, first in 1314 with Louis IV, and later in 1742 with Charles VII, a Wittelsbach actually wore the ultimate crown of the Holy Roman Empire. Talk about a glow-up, right? They climbed from local counts to the absolute pinnacle of European power.
Moving on to Part 2. Ambition carved in stone.
You can actually see this evolution physically anchored right in the heart of Munich, at the residence, because they didn't just wield authority, they built it, literally stone by stone. Step 1 starts back in 1385 as the Neueste, which was a heavily fortified, moated castle. Why a moat? Because the dukes literally needed a place to hide from their own rebellious citizens. But Step 2 tells a totally different story. Fast forward to the 16th century, and they feel secure enough to build the Antiquarium. It's this stunning, sprawling Renaissance hall meant for classical sculptures and grand state dinners. And finally, Step 3. In the 19th century, King Ludwig I builds the Königsbau, this incredibly confident neoclassical palace facing the public square, heavily inspired by the Renaissance palaces of Florence. So when you walk the echoing halls of the residence today, you are literally walking from a state of medieval fear straight into an era of absolute unapologetic royal confidence. And they did the exact same thing just beyond the city walls at Nymphenburg Palace. What started out in 1664 as a pretty simple summer pavilion to celebrate the birth of an heir was expanded by subsequent rulers into a massive, symmetrical Baroque complex. We're talking an ideal town built to accommodate the entire royal household. With rolling romantic English-style gardens and brilliant architectural gems like the Amalienburg Hunting Lodge just tucked away in the park, Nymphenburg became a very deliberate way for the Wittelsbachs to project their absolute authority across the landscape.
Which brings us to Part 3. The Napoleon Piddock. But, as we all know, thick stone walls can't exactly protect you from a totally changing world order. When a new conqueror swept across Europe, the Wittelsbachs had to rely on sheer diplomatic reinvention to survive. Picture this. It's the start of the 19th century. The Holy Roman Empire is totally collapsing, and the Wittelsbachs are highly threatened by their neighbor, Austria. Instead of fighting Napoleon and getting destroyed, they make a crucial, game-changing pivot. They ally with him. And their reward for this? Napoleon elevates Bavaria to a kingdom. Just like that, on January 1st, 1806, Duke Maximilian Joseph suddenly becomes King Maximilian I. They played this hand absolutely brilliantly. They cemented that alliance with the 1805 Treaty of Brno, and they even went so far as to marry off Princess Augusta to Eugene de Beauharnais, who was Napoleon's stepson. But here is the ultimate survivor move. In 1813, right before the Battle of Leipzig, when it was super clear that Napoleon's star was fading, Bavaria signs the Treaty of Ried. They turn against Napoleon at the exact right moment, joining the Allies, but on one strict condition. Their new status as a kingdom must be guaranteed. I mean, they played the geopolitical game perfectly.
Part 4. The Fairy Tale King.
Now, ironically, right as they hit their absolute peak, scoring their highest royal titles and stabilizing their kingdom, the dynasty enters its most eccentric, internationally famous, and frankly deeply tragic chapter. King Ludwig II took the throne in 1864 at just 18 years old, but the world around him was changing fast. By 1871, Bavaria was forced to integrate into the newly formed German Empire led by Prussia. This stripped away a massive amount of Ludwig's actual political autonomy. Feeling personally responsible for a war he lost, and totally hating the realities of modern governance, Ludwig retreated entirely into this elaborate world of myth, music, and medieval fantasy.
And that retreat? Well, it came at a seriously staggering cost. $250 million. That is the modern equivalent of the personal debt Ludwig racked up. He essentially completely ignored his government duties to focus all his energy on what he loved most: architecture.
He went all in, building the world-famous Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, and Herrenchiemsee. But completely draining the royal finances had major consequences. In 1886, his own government declared him mentally unfit to rule and deposed him. Just days later, he died under deeply mysterious circumstances in Lake Starnberg. When you visit these magnificent fairy tale palaces today, remember they weren't just pretty buildings. They were the spectacular, gilded cages of a ruler who possessed these grand titles but had almost zero real-world authority.
Finally, Part 5. A quiet abdication.
So this gradual loss of true authority over the late 19th century really set the stage for an incredibly anticlimactic finale. Unlike the bloody revolutions we saw in places like France or Russia, this 700-year dynasty ended not with a guillotine, but with a vague little piece of paper. On November 12, 1918, having fled the revolution in Munich, King Ludwig III signed the Anif Declaration at a quiet Austrian retreat. He merely released his civil servants and soldiers from their oaths of loyalty. Actually, he carefully avoided the word abdicate, hoping to maybe preserve future claims, but the new socialist government back in Munich didn't care. They immediately published it as a formal abdication. And just like that, the monarchy was over.
But remember what we said at the start, the Wittelsbachs are the ultimate survivors, and they managed to survive one last time, this time through a bureaucratic property settlement. In 1923, they established the Compromise Fund. The state took ownership of the grand palaces like the Residenz and Nymphenburg, opening them up to the public. But in exchange, the family foundation retained massive tracts of land, private estates, and their pre-1800 art collections. Today, this massive trust fund still yields millions of euros annually for the descendants of the family. They successfully traded defunct political power for lasting financial and cultural security. Truly a modern reinvention.
So, as you prepare to step through the very real, very heavy doors of the Munich Residenz or stroll the massive gardens at Nymphenburg Palace, I'll leave you with this to consider about these ultimate survivors. What truly lasts longer, the laws and political power of a king, or the stone, art, and beauty they leave behind for the rest of us? Keep that in mind as you walk in their footsteps. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and enjoy your journey into the Wittelsbach Saga.